Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's so good to see you, all of you here today. I want to start today with something that I just decided I'm going to start with today. I pulled something off out of my email, a little message. You know, many of us are on lists, and you get little messages, and I get little quotations from this source and little quotations from that source all over the country, all over the world. And this is one that comes from our daily quote. Anyway, and I thought this is a good thing to start with right now. I was set free because my greatest fear had been realized. And I still had a daughter who I adored. And I had an old typewriter and a big idea. So rock bottom became a solid foundation on which I built my life. That's from J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter books. Isn't that something? I love that statement. Rock bottom became a solid foundation on which I built my life. A message for every one of us there. What are we talking about here today? Well, we'll see as we go along, and it keeps changing in my mind. But I'm going to be talking about the secret of winners. Or we could say the secret of champions. Or we could just talk about winning in general. Or we can just talk about and say the secret of success, because it all amounts to pretty much the same thing. But the big question is, what does it take? What does it take to win? What does it take to be a champion? What does it take to be successful? And there is a particular scripture that I just love that gives us some clues onto this, and this is Paul. St. Paul, some of you know him as, depending on what your upbringing was. In the 11th chapter of Hebrews, I don't quote the New Testament very much, but this is one of those days. I wish I had my Bible so I could point to it. And I have a floppy Bible. It's very impressive. But he makes a statement that is really, I think, very, very significant. And he lays out some basic principles for being able to move forward in life. And they are these. He starts off and he says, well, he talks about a bunch of things, Moses and the Abraham and the Hebrews and various other people. And he says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses, in other words, these are the examples in our life, and it's like truth is always looking at us, let us lay aside every encumbrance which clings so closely to us. And let us run with perseverance the race set before us. And looking, and he refers to Jesus, and it doesn't matter which orientation, it could be Buddha, it could be Krishna, it could be Lao Tzu, it can be the source, and that's the way I tend to look at it. The pioneer and the perfecter always look to this source, the source of our faith. So these three principles is what we're talking about. Three basic characteristics. That is, set aside everything that might encumber you. Number two, persevere in whatever it is you're undertaking to do. And number three, follow the ideal. Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these. You know, Paul is an interesting guy. He talks a lot about, he must have been an athlete, because he talks a lot about different kinds of athletic events, especially races. That was the big thing, track and field kinds of things back in those times, about 2,000 years ago. And we come away from a lot of his writings that life is a race. And it's kind of interesting to look at it that way. When you think of life as a race, what does it involve? Racing. Or in any way moving forward. It involves training, attentiveness, perseverance, pacing, and faith. And all of these things involve discipline. He has something to say about discipline in the same chapter from which I got those 3 points a moment ago. He says, all discipline for the moment, I love this, all discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. Yet those who had been trained by it, afterwards it yields the fruit of righteousness. Think about this. It's tough to exercise discipline in your life. But when you allow yourself to be trained by the discipline that you employ in your life, it's like everything else seems to unfold before you. Sometimes people come into this kind of a teaching and they learn about affirmative prayer, or what we refer to with the fancy name of spiritual mind treatment, and other techniques of being able to control your thoughts and to direct your attention. And they tend to look at life as it's really going to be easy for me right now. And I remember when I first got involved with this teaching, it was quite a number of years ago, and I'm thinking it was near the end of the 1960s. I was very new to it, and I went to a little place called the Science of Mind Center of Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was living in Santa Fe. I'd lived there quite a long while. And somebody had established the Science of Mind Center, and they were well enough established that they hired a minister. She was wonderful. Her name was Martha Stewart, not that one. This is a different Martha Ann Stewart. And we all loved her very much. She had some funny ideas about things. I remember one time I was in a class that she was giving, a metaphysical class in the evening. And she got to a certain point, and then she made a comment, and the comment was, life should be easy. And you know, I looked at that, and I know you're rolling it around yourself. I said, well, maybe it should be, but it sure has never been for me. And I got to thinking about that. Should life be easy? Are the easy things in life the things by which you have learned the most? Are the easy things in life those that have helped develop stamina and persistence in life? Or can you think of any real easy thing in life that has any, up to this point at least, any lasting impact on you? And you know, I realize, well, maybe life ought to be easy, but it sure hasn't been for me. There are no shortcuts. There are no quick fixes. And a lot of people come into this kind of a teaching and think, well, we've got these techniques and wonderful things we do, and we learn how to pray in a specific way, and so this is going to smooth out the bumps in the road, and it's going to be easy for us. I don't know. I've not experienced that. Maybe some of you have. Many of us have experienced the incredible demonstration of having used this kind of thinking in being able to have something unfold before you pretty much the way you anticipated, or usually better than you anticipated. But it's not necessarily been easy. We don't teach that there are shortcuts. We don't teach that there are quick fixes. What we teach, or what we try to propound upon and help people achieve, is a clarity in their own thinking, a clarity in the way they look at life. There are these three principles that I mentioned just a moment ago. Setting aside any of the encumbrances that tend to stand in the way of your moving forward. Number two, persevere in whatever it is you have undertaken. And number three, follow that inspiration, that source, whether it be a principle, a person, or a thing. And I want to talk about these. First of all, let's take a look at the first principle. Lay aside. Lay aside every encumbrance, every weight, everything which clings to you. Now just think about that. How many things do we have a tendency to hold on to? And it's like we go through life dragging them behind us, not wanting to let go, and yet we want to get over here. We all do this, don't we? And there's some very interesting things too. All you have to do is walk in the homes of many of us and go into your garage, or maybe not even the garage, your closets, and look around at all of the stuff you just won't let go of. And you say, well, that's silly. That's such a materialistic kind of thing, and that's not what you're talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about, because that's a reflection of a lot of the other emotional and psychological things that we have a tendency to hold on to, and we just won't let go of. Most of you here probably never experienced anything like that. But so the people that are really the champions, the real winners in life, have this ability to let go of stuff, and they tend to travel light. Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, great 19th century philosopher and writer, and some of you know of him, and that doesn't really matter. He was a Dane and very well known in certain circles. He defined purity of heart as willing one thing. Think about that. Willing one thing. Now, that doesn't mean that that's what you're going to give your whole life to for the whole lifetime that you're in experience of right now. But for the moment, give your attention to what it is that's important to you. Willing one thing. And some people might look at this and they say, well, it's kind of like having a one-track mind. That's not exactly what I mean. Or maybe it is in a sense, but it's in a particular way. I don't mean a one-track mind that many people get stuck on. Well, let me give you an example. There's a story of a lady widow that was in a retirement home, and she was playing bridge with some of the other ladies that were there. And a new man walked in, and she looked up and she says, "You're new here, aren't you?" He says, yes, I just moved in. She says, "Well, where are you from?" And he hesitated a little bit, and he says, "Well, I'd just been released after 20 years in San Quentin." Ooh, and she said, "What were you in for?" He said, "Well, I murdered my wife." She says, "Oh, then you're single." That's what you call a one-track mind, is not necessarily the most useful way of approaching something. Having a one-track mind doesn't mean that you're always on track, by the way. It means that you can see what it is that you're moving toward. You know, it's like, I think of the Apollo shot where we went to the moon. It was never on track. Do you realize that? It was always correcting along the way. And that's the way that it got there. And that's the way that we have a tendency to do things in life. We constantly know where it is we're going, and we move in the direction, and then we have to be willing to accommodate as we're going along. Okay, that's the first principle. Lay aside everything, focus on where it is you're going. And the second principle is run with perseverance, the race that is before you. That's kind of like associated with that idea of willing one thing. There is a race before us, and sometimes it gets very complicated, but sometimes we can't identify it because we allow ourselves to get scattered all over the place. But there is a race, and that's the race that you're running, and this is where the perseverance comes in. And when I think of perseverance, I think of a great athlete. This is back a long time ago, but many of you still know him because he's noted more for his witticisms than he is his skill on the baseball field. But back in 1947, this young, new baseball player, he was a catcher, and he showed up for spring practice. He was hired, and he was awkward and funny looking. Didn't appear to be very athletic at all. He swung funny at the bat. All sorts of strange things. People laughed at him. They criticized him. The sports writers and the media got hold of this, and he became a joke to them. And yet he became, in the minds of Americans, one of the most lovable characters in the field of athletics or field of baseball. By the way, he hit in his career 385 home runs. He was on 14 pennant-winning teams. He was 3 times voted the most valuable player. He won himself 18 world records. And this is this awkward, funny guy who you still remember, you all know, this fella by the name of Lawrence Berra, don't you? You don't know Lawrence Berra? How about Yogi Berra? You remember him? Yeah. He's still noted for his quick wit. Incredible athlete. There are all kinds of people that never give up. They keep moving ahead regardless of what the appearances are around them. I'm thinking now of a fellow who ran the marathon, the New York City Marathon. His name was Bob Ireland. And this was quite a long while ago. It was back in 1986. He was last to finish the race. He had the slowest time in history. He was the 19,000 something or other to cross the finish line, and it took him 4 days, 2 hours, and 28 minutes, I believe it was, to complete that task. He was 40 years old when he did this. And for the 17 years before he entered the race, it was 17 years before this that he had lost both of his legs. And yet he did the race. And a reporter went up to him and asked, why you even ran? And he made the comment, success is not about where you start. It's about where you finish. Think about that. And the only way you can finish is to keep your eye on where it is you're going and persist in moving in that particular direction. And sometimes we'll find that life rains on our parade and all kinds of things come along and have a tendency to interfere with all of our plans and all of our processes and all of the ideas. But you see, the winner, the champion, the successful person hangs in there. And how do they do that? How do they hang in there? It's this thing called perseverance. One of the best examples of this that I know of is Winston Churchill, Prime Minister Winston Churchill. During the time when Britain was being the onslaught of the Nazi Air Force was causing havoc in Britain, he gave a speech. And the speech was 5 words long. But it mobilized people that were so depressed and discouraged about what was going on. And the speech was this: never, oh no, wait a minute, start all over. Never, if you ever heard him on television, never give up. Think about that. It just stirs me. I almost want to come to tears when I think about that. So that's the perseverance, the second principle that we're talking about here. Let's look at this third principle that advises us to look at the source. Look at the source. And in the scriptures it says Jesus, but whatever the source represents to you, look at the source, the pioneer and perfecter of your faith, because it is the source that is going to build this sense of faith. You know, Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder, defines faith as a belief so strong that there's nothing in your mind that can deny it. And so we want to be able to build this. And we build it by doing some of the things we're talking about here. Because that shows us the way to go. It inspires us for our next moves. By looking to the source, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. I interpret this in this very, very broadest sense. To me, it is the source. It is God. To turn always and look to God and recognize, in the beginning, all there was that. You remember the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. Ain't nothing made except through the expression of that Word. It's put a little bit differently in the Gospel. So what does that make me? Chopped liver? No, I am of that. I am of the very essence of the only reality there is, which is that thing that we call God. That's what it means to be a child of God. So we look to this, and we let that pull us, as well as we persevere in forwarding ourselves toward it. So there's kind of an attraction there when we begin to resonate with that idea. We have a saying in Science of Mind that goes, God in me, as me, is me. Think about that. God in me, as me, is me. It's talking about this identification. In the beginning was the Word, and there was nothing made except through the expression of the Word. The creative impulse, intention, and intelligence behind it all expressed itself as everything. This is the same kind of an idea. We can personalize it, and a lot of people do. They will personalize it as Jesus. Jesus becomes that goal, that objective, that thing that's going to pull them, or Moses, or Lao Tzu, or Muhammad, or whatever, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, the great, whatever it is that you conceptualize as the ideal that you want to pull you as well as you want to follow and reach out for and persevere in following. I find that when I begin to get a little bit lost about things, and I'll think back at some of these great inspirations in life, and sometimes I want to personalize it. And I ask myself, when I'm in a real tight spot, what would they do? And the interesting thing is, an enlightened one, an inspiration, a person that has real meaning to you insofar as what they have been able to demonstrate in life, that you might like to emulate. You may say to yourself, well, I don't know what to do. But if you look at that one and ask yourself, what would he or what would she do? Get a pretty good idea. You usually have an idea of what this one or they, however many of them there may be, would do. So it's just a lot of times we don't want to accept the responsibility of doing what it is we know we need to do to be successful in life. And you can say, well, why is that? I don't know. Just stop it. Don't do it. Then there are people that come along and they'll say, but there are tough situations and you've just got to face facts. I mean, you can't possibly succeed that way. There's just really no way to go. Have you ever had people say that to you? Of course you have. I think we've all had that kind of discouragement laid over on us when we come up with an idea about something it is that we want to do or some avenue that we want to pursue. And somebody will right away tell us why we can't do it. Well, it's because they never did it themselves or wanted to do it, but are afraid to do it and rationalize not doing it. But you know what I mean. And you may have done that to your friends, too, in some way or another. Heavens to Betsy, I don't want my friend to succeed in doing something that I know I could have done if I really wanted to do. So I'll just say, it really can't be done. You can't possibly succeed that way. No, I've really never done that. I just, I'm above all of that. You can tell, I'm sure. Sometimes we got to fly right in the face of the facts. Facing the facts, I think, sometimes is the worst possible thing that we could do. I think it's better if we face our faith. I think in virtually every significant instance of progress that I can think of, there's somebody who chose not to face the facts. This is when we choose to face our faith. I remember a time years ago when I was a fairly young man, quite a number of years ago, it was back about 1970, I guess. I was still working on the staff at Los Alamos, and I was given a project. NASA gave me a contract to do a certain kind of a research. And my job was to put together a team and work on a particular kind of project. What it was putting a carbide coating on carbon particles. Okay, now you know all about that. it's not a real easy thing to do. I mean, superficially you look at it, it was something we wanted to do for various reasons and whatever. And so I was given the money to pursue this. It was a NASA contract. They gave me the money. So I put together a team, and on the team I had a scientist, a wonderful, wonderful guy. He was a microscopist. He was a metallographer, actually. Looks through microscopes and examines materials and that sort of stuff. And he was world renowned, as a matter of fact. And he was on my particular team. That doesn't mean I was world renowned, but I was hoping he could make me world renowned by doing good work for me. At any rate, so I gave him the job of, before we even got started, of doing a literature survey to find out what had been done in the carbide coating of carbon particles. And he did his usual exhaustive kind of work and came back with his report to me and said, "We can't do it. It's impossible." I uttered an expletive, and I said, "Well, we've got to do it. They've already given us the money. We've already bought equipment. We already have the team together." Well, to make a long story short, we did it. And I think it was, we were kind of pushed to it. So we had to push forward. And Winston Churchill again, never, never, never give up. We face faith. We draw our strength from God. We draw from the highest ideal that we know. We focus our attention on where we're going. And we know where we are going in a general sense because all of the great ones that have gone before us have known where they were going once they started going. Have you ever noticed that? That you may hesitate. But sometimes it takes that first step forward to be able to see one step farther than you ever saw before. And many are so reluctant to take that step. This is the way ultimately we finish the race and we demonstrate our own ability to be a winner in this race of life. Let's have a spiritual mind treatment now, shall we? Ooh, take a nice deep breath. If you want to. Or a shallow breath, if that suits you. Or stop breathing altogether if you want. Okay, we relax into this moment. We declare that our minds and hearts are open to the inspiration of Spirit. We are immersed in Spirit. There is this one field of goodness, of life, of love, within which resides everything. And the things that are distinguished within this field of oneness, I call it, are bound only by our conceptions, those things that we perceive as binding perceptions. So we let go, we release. We declare that we reside in a field of unlimited possibilities and opportunities, and all boundaries, all restraints, all limitations are dissolved. We are one with it all. And within this field, we can choose, or we can just show up. For we know there is a guiding principle of the intelligence behind everything that is the very essence of love, seeking constantly to pour itself into every aspect of creation. And I am part of that creation. I see clearly. I know that I am guided along the paths that define my next steps toward what it is I am unfolding in my life as the highest expression of my life, with the greatest contribution made or possible in my life. This is the essence of every one of us. Each of us resides within that field of love, of joy, of intelligence, of goodness, of creativity, of abundance. Wow. That's my home. That's the home of everyone here. And we breathe in the essence of this spiritual something, and as we breathe it out, we see all boundaries disappear. And we are left with the allness of life, the true expression of who each one of us is. And we know that in this realization, there is only harmony and balance. So all is healed. All is made whole. I am so grateful for this wonderful realization, and I accept it for myself. I accept it for everyone here. I know that it is so. And I can truly say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, God. And so it is.